Hi, this is E.T. The information you're about to hear comes from a periodical, Boxing Monthly, specifically from writer Gary Lucan. He's one of E.T.'s favorite scribes. There's also some information from another writer, Tom Hawthorne. If you have not already subscribed to Boxing Monthly, check out their online offerings at boxingmonthly.com. In E.T.'s last video, and there were others too, there was a mention of an exhibition bout between newly crowned heavyweight champion Jack Johnson versus a young man who later in life would become an actor. He reigned for decades on screen and on television as one of the most popular character actors. And here he is, Victor McLaughlin, seen here at age 22 with champion Jack Johnson. McLaughlin was born in England, his father an Anglican bishop in South Africa. He ran away from home in his early teens. He wanted to fight in the Boer War. Later on, he's in Canada as a prospector. He lives for a while in Tacoma, Washington, in the United States. In fact, that's when he met the champion. After McLaughlin fought Jack Johnson, he spent a year or so traveling with circus, boxing and wrestling farmers and anybody else who could earn $25, big money then, if they lasted 3 rounds with McLaughlin. Very few collected on that. During World War I, the Great War, he enlisted in the English Army. He became heavyweight champion, by the way, in the Army. After the war, he's in Hollywood. This is during the reign of silent films, small roles, but they got bigger with each movie until after the talkies, which came in 1928, he was getting some major roles. He wins the Oscar as Best Actor in the movie The Informer in 1935. Later on, during the 1950s, he'd be nominated for Best Supporting Actor in The Quiet Man, that starred John Wayne, and Maureen O'Hara. Well, getting to the Johnson-McLaughlin fight, it was an exhibition. There was so little published about it that many people assumed the whole story was myth. In fact, if you go to boxrec.com or any other listing of boxing records, you'll see nothing mentioned about Johnson versus McLaughlin because it was not an official bout. It was an exhibition. But, and I want to emphasize this, it was a fight. Here are the facts. The fight took place March 10, 1909. There were 6 2-minute rounds. The place, Vancouver, BC Athletic Club. Both fighters got very short notice about this bout. It took place after Jack Johnson returned to North America. He had been in Australia, where he took the title from Tommy Burns. Well, the fight got very little publicity. It was mentioned in, the Vancouver World, Tacoma Times, and there was nothing that went out over the air because broadcast radio will not appear for another 11 years. It was just an exhibition. It was done as a favor by the champion Johnson to raise money for the athletic club in Vancouver. Now here is the story, and it's in précis. A day after Christmas in 1908, in Sydney, Australia, Johnson took the heavyweight title from Tommy Burns. About a month later, he is in Vancouver, BC. He's planning to relax and then begin an extended trip through England and then Europe. But Johnson was persuaded by a friend to perform an exhibition. His opponent was going to be the Colorado giant, Ed Martin. Now, Martin is somebody that Johnson defeated twice before. I think it was 1903 and another in 1904. The last one was by a KO because Martin's wife in Seattle was ill. Or maybe for other reasons, Martin opted out of another duel with Johnson. So McLaughlin was chosen to meet the new champion. And here's how things went down. Johnson, 1 hour before the fight began, did appear in the ring. Everybody was cheering. He is resplendent in his evening clothes. He has a large diamond in his shirt. He's a lot like Apollo Creed in the movie Rocky. He gives a quick speech. He thanked Vancouver residents for their, as he put it, many kindnesses. And he said nice things about Tommy Burns, whom he had recently beaten. He said Burns gave a black man a chance for the championship. He was beaten, but he was game. Johnson weighed about 210 pounds. That would be 95 kilos. Well, Johnson's going to go back to get in his fighting gear, and 2 preliminary bouts will take place. Now he's back in the ring, as is Victor McLaughlin, and the fight went pretty much as you would expect. Jack Johnson, the champion, controlled the action for all 6 rounds. He would sidestep away from McLaughlin's rushes, and he continued smiling and chatting for all 6 rounds. In the fight, there were 2, major happenings. One in round 1, where Johnson landed a hard left hook into McLaughlin's solar plexus. It was so hard that McLaughlin went to his knees. Now, Johnson could have followed up, but eased up for the remainder of round 1. Then during round 6, and by this time, McLaughlin is totally out of breath. Remember, he got something like 2 hours' notice. But during the final round, round 6, the champion threw out a flurry of punches against McLaughlin's midsection and face. Then he finishes with a hard, stiff uppercut, landed square on McLaughlin's jaw. Now, had the fight gone any further, it is doubtful, according to what I've read, that McLaughlin would have survived upright. Several commentators noted that he appeared exhausted by round 3. What few papers covered the bout scored it overwhelmingly for Johnson. It was the Washington Herald that said, and I'm quoting, "Johnson gave a dazzling exhibition of boxing, and he walloped McLaughlin at will," unquote. The Tacoma Times said, and I'm quoting, "McLaughlin of Tacoma was easy for Big Jack Johnson," unquote. Taking a look now at the lives of both fighters after the bout. Jack Johnson went on to win 9 victories as champion until in 1915 he lost the title in Cuba to Big Jess Willard. Johnson will continue to box until the early 1930s with mixed results. He continued his tours during that period and after, entertaining people with stories and his dancing and singing. On June 20 of 1946, Jack Johnson, age 68, died near, I think it was Franklinton, North Carolina, after being thrown from his car. The car had hit a light pole and flipped over. Looking at Victor McLaughlin after the fight, he did continue boxing a bit. Then he returned to England, enlisted, as I mentioned before. Then he goes to Hollywood, bit parts, silent films. And, he won the Oscar as Best Actor in 1935, and went on to make many more films and act on TV, mainly character parts. He transitions to TV, as many Hollywood actors did not. TV in the United States took off after 1945. And his most famous movie in that period after War II was The Quiet Man with John Wayne and Maureen O'Hara. An obvious question arises. Did Jack Johnson and Victor McLaughlin ever meet again? I don't think so. There's certainly no record of it. But both men spoke of the other several times. Here are just a few examples. Jack Johnson, in 1936, told writer Damon Runyon, and I'm quoting, "Them people in Vancouver thought Mr. McLaughlin was a good fighter, and I never did nothing to make them think nothing else," unquote. Then in 1937, Johnson told a newspaper, quote, McLaughlin was a dandy fighter and a dandy fellow. He deserved the great break that he got later, unquote. Victor McLaughlin was more reticent about speaking of the fight, but he did say this. In 1926, and I'm quoting McLaughlin, Johnson beat me in the scheduled 6 rounds, but I gave him a tough scrap, and I got a broken nose for my effort. In 1930, McLaughlin said, the fight was on the up and up. If Johnson could have put me out, he would have done so. And then I think it was in 1934. McLaughlin said, and I'm quoting, Johnson was undoubtedly the hardest man to hit I ever met. He was also the most charming opponent, standing well back, waving me forward, chattering away blithely during the heat of a clinch, and never altering that good-natured expression which some men found so disconcerting, unquote. In 1959, Victor McLaughlin is just months away from death. And he did say this about Jack Johnson, and I'm quoting, to tell you the truth, Johnson gave me an awful whipping, unquote. McLaughlin died a few weeks after making those comments. He had just appeared in an episode of a TV show called Rawhide that starred Clint Eastwood, and that episode was directed by Arthur McLaughlin, Victor's son. Epilogue. Former champion Tommy Burns left boxing in 1920 with only 4 defeats. You remember Burns had lost the title to Jack Johnson. Burns became a Christian, and he denounced boxing, and he apologized to Johnson for some of his, Burns, name-calling. I'll let you guess what that was about. Tommy Burns died in Vancouver, heart attack. Someone found a card in his pocket, and it read this way, Tom Burns, demonstrator of universal love. Also, do you remember Ed Martin? He was the fighter that Jack Johnson had fought before twice, but who backed out of the exhibition. Well, Denver Ed Martin continued boxing until 1921 when he lost to the great Harry Wills. He retired to coaching young fighters in Spokane, Washington, and elsewhere. Oh, something else. It gets overlooked whenever this Johnson-McLaughlin fight gets talked about. Prior to backing out of the fight with Johnson, Denver Ed had in fact fought Victor McLaughlin. Who won? You tell me. Put it in the comments below. This is E.T. Thank you for watching. If you haven't done so, subscribe to this channel. Do like this video, well, if you liked it. And don't forget, comment below. Thank you.